Welcome to the Intimacy Lab. I'm Michelle Renee, an intimacy guide, surrogate partner, and professional cuddler. We're here to talk about intimacy in a much broader view than what you're probably thinking. Most people think about intimacy as sex. We're going to break that apart here. Welcome to the lab. Welcome back to the Intimacy Lab. Today I'm joined with David Khalili, who is a LMFT up in the Bay Area, who we just kind of like ran into each other because I love listening to podcasts. And David was a guest on Get Naked with Dr. Kate. It was during Soft Cock Week. And your conversation was just like right in alignment with what I've been talking about the whole week. And it was just like, if we'd only known this was on purpose or something.
I know,
right? It wasn't at all. But then I was like, oh, wait, I think we're connected on Instagram. So I went and found one of your posts and just shared that I was really loved your conversation. And you were like, we should connect.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I don't know. I feel like I still pinch myself that people are a yes to connecting with me for some reason. I think it's because I'm not in the regular talk therapy world as far as like, I'm not a talk therapist.
Right.
I would love working with talk therapists.
Yeah.
I prefer to collaborate than to work solo. And not everybody's like game to invite me to their table. So thanks, David.
You're welcome at my table at any time. And thank you for having me at your table.
Thanks for joining us. So part of, I didn't ask you about this beforehand. So you have the option to say no. Like, but I've been doing these, we're not really strangers cards with people that come on the.
I almost played with that last night, actually. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, I'm just gonna. So I'm not gonna pull from the regular deck just because this little healing edition has been really interesting as far as like how it relates to my work and stuff, and I'm like kind of loving these cards.
Cool.
So if you're
I'll
cool,
check out
we're
that
just
deck
gonna.
too.
So we're not really strangers. Had 40% off their entire store, like around Black Friday and all that kind of time. And so I kind of went in and bought every expansion that I had that I didn't have. And so I have a whole pile of these cards, and there's a history to that. When was the last time you didn't ask for help but really needed it?
Oh boy, that's
and
a good one.
Explain. And we can take our time to think about it. There's no rush. And I'm going to think for a second about what mine would be. I feel like I could just say all the time because I'm really bad at asking for help.
And it's like, so I have like a really specific example of going hiking with my friends and my now wife. And for some reason, and it's not this conscious thing, but like when someone says, do you want water? Like, no.
I'm good. Yeah.
But I'm like, not good. We're like 5 miles into the hike and my water's out. And so then what ends up happening is, and I don't like this about myself, and I'm working on it, but what ends up happening is someone has to just hand me and go, here, take the water. This is your water now. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah.
And I feel it's the same way with like getting massages or getting some type of, I used to hate the idea of getting massages and hate the idea of like just a stranger touching me. But then as I started to really be like, okay, this is a learning process. I'm not going to just really sink into this right away. And now I love them. I go, once a month, if not twice a month, and can just sink in, and my nervous system isn't really activated as it used to be. And so I think those are moments where, I could ask for help with like, I'm tense everywhere, but then not. Yeah.
Okay. Question. How are you at letting your massage therapist know when you need something different?
Getting better.
Good. Because I know we're all a work in progress, right? And I love the idea that like people like to put us on pedestals, right? I know I'm like seen on a pedestal a lot, and I like to take myself off the pedestal a lot to say, I'm just a couple steps ahead of you all.
Right.
Like it's not a finished product. I don't think there is a finished product, right? And I do the same thing. I remember going into the Korean spa, one of them here in San Diego. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do the massage and the body scrub.
Uh-huh.
And they asked like, how hard do you want your massage? And I put like, yeah, hard. Oh my
Uh-huh.
gosh, was I so out of my league when I said hard? I did not know what I was signing up for. And the communication was a real struggle with the practitioner. And
Uh-huh.
I just was like, I just kept saying, wow, you're really strong. It's like I didn't know how to advocate for myself
Right.
in that
Yeah.
space. And like I'm one of these people that kind of have to, I'm a slow processor sometimes. And like I have to take some space away and give myself like sometimes I'm like, okay, Michelle, look, you figured that out faster than last time.
Yep.
That's an improvement,
Yeah.
right? You asked, I remember I used this example a lot of this, like kind of like, maybe it's not asking for help, it's speaking up,
Uh-huh.
where I've said to my partner, look, that thing you did back there when we were driving, that was some shit. Like you just totally like zoned out on our conversation and just like acted like I wasn't there anymore. Like I'm in the
Uh-huh.
middle of telling you a story and you're on your phone and like, what was that about? And the good news was it only took me 10 minutes of stewing in the car before I brought it
Uh-huh.
up rather than a day.
Yep.
Right. Sometimes it's those little like
That's what yeah,
increments.
that's the marker of success. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So specifically last time that I didn't ask for help, I really needed it. It's I can't think of an example exactly because I'm getting better at it.
Yeah.
So it's like I will tell you the last time I got really frustrated and almost didn't ask for help, right? Like I got there. It just took
Uh-huh.
me it takes me a little bit to remember that I can ask for help.
Yep.
It wasn't a thing in my household growing up that was really encouraged.
Yeah, and I think for me culturally, both of my parents immigrated, and specifically for my dad coming from Iran, and in that culture, it's very collectivistic, very community oriented, and there's the way that you show love is by like taking up space or not taking up space, and knowing how to kind of navigate and um, weave through, and I'm starting to think of other things related to that, but so in a way, like that is part of why I have that reaction, or that kind of sensibility of me, is making sure everyone else is taken care of before I am, and
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, just some of those aspects. And so when I go through my mind of like, okay, how much of this is related to culture, to masculinity, to anxiety, to it's a lot of little things in each column, but I think it's a useful exercise to know, like, okay, well, which column is taking up the most real estate? And
Yeah,
start there. Yeah.
the intersectionalities that show up and
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I know as somebody socialized female, like
Right.
it's just
Oh
that's
yeah.
part of the ingrained process of helping others, but maybe not getting support for yourself. Again, it goes to so many, it's like lasagna. I'm just like, you're talking columns and I'm thinking in the other direction of like, oh, there's
Yeah.
so many layers here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um I I was listening. I again love podcasts. I was listening to a really great podcast. I think it was last week, maybe the week before, on Huberman Lab about
Mm.
this one specific form of journaling that they have scientifically proven to be actually really beneficial. Like they can prove that it affects your immune system.
Oh wow.
And it was like basically you would take a traumatic experience and you would write about it for 15 to 30 minutes, everything you could remember about it,
Hmm.
being as honest as you can be, right? Not minimizing your experience.
Mm.
Everything you could recall, put it down. You could type it or write it, didn't matter
Hmm.
which one of those you used. And you would do it for 4 days in a row or once every day for 4 weeks. Not once every week for 4 weeks or 4 days in a row.
Uh-huh.
And they came out with similar blood work results around
Wow.
your immune system. And so I came across a task the other day that I was just like very overwhelmed by. I couldn't figure out how to do it. I hate that I didn't know how to do the thing, right? And I started to beat myself up. Like, why do I
Mm.
not know how to do this? And then I started to get emotional and the tears started to
Mhm.
well up. And then I just said, okay, I need to walk away from this task, But then I was like, oh, I'm already in this activated space. I should write about it. I should do
Uh-huh.
this journaling exercise, right? And I couldn't pinpoint an exact experience where that I could tie that to, but I just wrote
Mm.
about the culture of my upbringing,
Mm.
right? Of what it was
Mhm.
like when I was a kid to need help. That wasn't super welcomed.
Uh-huh.
I was the person in charge of keeping all my sisters in line. I was the like there was just a lot of pressure there. And so it was kind of interesting to take that
Yeah.
exercise and kind of jot down your thoughts, and I could come up with stuff that I couldn't come up if it was just in my head. It
Very
was like
cool.
writing it down helped me kind of sort it out. So it was kind of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
in a crying, I'm really emotionally exhausted
Sure.
kind of way afterwards.
That fun. Yeah.
That's what you like to do for fun. I mean, it wasn't a Friday night, but you know, anywho. So thanks for playing with me.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, are you cool if we talk about some of my like what I was thinking about when I listened to your podcast episode with Dr.
Please.
Kate?
Yeah. And I'm also
So,
happy to talk about the Complex PTSD book too.
yeah, okay. So, let me just I want to highlight something, and maybe we'll bring you back to talk about this on the Soft Cock Week podcast, but
Okay.
I want to touch on it here
Uh-huh.
cuz I just was like, "Oh yeah, there was a point we were talking you were talking about the circular how do you
Mm.
call it? Your circular
Circular model of sex, or also
yeah.
the smorgasbord of delight. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it because I think you painted the picture of like a 70s round bed that rotates, right?
Yep.
And there's like all this sex around the edges, right?
Uh-huh.
And I love that. And that's totally my soft cock thing is like, can we just expand our ideas of what sex are and we can solve a lot of this, right? It's
Yeah.
not such an issue when you have erectile differences, when you aren't expecting to move the sexual escalator,
Yeah.
right?
100%. Yeah.
So there was a little moment where you said something about, I should have pulled the exact quote, but I'm terrible at prepping for these things. You said something about that, at least what landed in my mind was what happens in a space where you get so desperate to move through the sexual escalator.
Mm.
It made me think about consent.
Yep.
And we get out of our integrity when we get so goal focused.
Yeah.
Am I remembering that correctly?
No, you're absolutely on point. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that I talked about also on Midori's Consent Dojo podcast, where we talked about anxiety interfering with consent.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so yeah, to your point, right, when you have the linear model of sex, which is that escalator that goes, it's the bases, is another way to think
Yep.
about it. Um, and so if your whole goal is to chase your cum or to whatever it may be, then you're only just going to be focused on that outcome rather
Yeah.
than, whatever may be involved. Or and so yeah, so especially for guys that I've talked to where they may feel like they don't have the best of luck with sex or with getting dates or anything like that, it becomes this very desperate toxic act of like, and I don't even think it's, for some it's conscious, but for others it's not that conscious, but it, it's something that needs to be brought to the conscious so that they can investigate it. But it's like, I
Yeah.
better get mine, or this is my only chance, or, you know, um, and that is changing to an extent over time, just as, the concepts of masculinity and expectations of that are changing, but not fast enough.
Yeah, I think it's something that we'd never. I've done soft cock week for 2 years. Let's not act like
Mm.
there's this long lineage here. But it was a topic that we hadn't touched on and we didn't
Mm.
touch on this year. And I think it's something that should be brought to the forefront just as something to be aware of.
Yep.
Right. I think that's the part of consent. When we talk about consent, there's so many nuances. People get stuck on the yes, no. Like
Right.
was there a yes or a no given? But it's the agreements. It's how we're going to meet each other.
Yeah.
And if we've got, I see clients that are just like their idea of what successful sex looks like is a little stunted in their development, I think.
Yep.
And it gets in the way of them really considering what the other person that they're with is experiencing.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
because then it becomes very self-focused, very goal-focused.
Mm-hmm.
The other person becomes like a prop in that
Yeah.
situation just for the goal. Even if you were to ask them, Like, do you see your partner as a prop? They're like, no, of course not. But
No,
there's just,
they're completely unaware, and
yeah,
you don't expect them to be aware, right?
yeah,
I said to a client the other day, I said, I think what you're not understanding is that good sex does not mean good connection,
mm,
but good connection can very well mean good
uh-huh,
sex.
yeah,
Right. And I think you're, it's like this focus of, I've got to get really good at the sex because then I'll be able to have good connections.
right,
It's like, no, 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 but we got to do it the other way around. Like, at least that's how I work. Right.
yeah,
And is there a rock that says that message that I could just beat against people's head? Like, it's such a dance to try to help them, uh, uh, put some of the, like, I don't say we got to move through the developmental stages in a way. And it's
yeah,
like, who this is why I like working triadically and having a
mm,
good talk person on the team that can help. That's not my world, right? That's not
right,
my specialty. And so um, I'm just there to help them have a laboratory to kind of experience what connection feels like, generally from the platonic side.
right.
That's my 90% of my work is spent in that space. And yet they all come looking for the sex help. So,
Yeah. And I'm looking at ways, right, to go build off of your point around like helping with connection. It's like with cooking, you want to learn techniques first before just kind of the few recipes, or at least in my mind,
mm-hmm,
and so when I'm working with couples or individuals, I'm helping them learn how to connect with themselves and understand, their emotional reactions. I tell them in session, like, if you ever, while we're talking, if you have a sudden shift in emotion, even if you're mid-sentence, just stop and let us know, and
mm-hmm,
we'll either investigate it or we'll just kind of bookmark it and keep going. And that intervention alone helps them kind of practice recognizing when they're having a shift in emotion so that they can name it to their partner. um,
mm-hmm.
Something I'm constantly saying to couples is, well, why don't you ask? They'll say like, well, you did this because of that, 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 that. And I'm like, well, ask him,
Yeah. The
and that's,
story gets in the way so
yeah,
often,
and it builds
right?
up and builds and builds. Yeah,
Yeah. That whole like just talk about it thing is such a skill set that if you didn't grow up in a household where it was
right.
safe, now you've got this person that it might be safe with or it might not be safe with, but you don't know until you try. And that's where having a good therapist to help kind of
Yeah,
practice that, like hold the space to be able to walk somebody through that. Because it's like, it would be like trying to perform surgery if you've never taken a class on anatomy.
right.
In so many ways, you've got to have somebody that's there that can model and say, wait a minute,
Yeah,
we're moving into that rut of thought that we tend to go down.
right,
Let's see,
right.
let's think of another way we could approach this. I don't know. Reed Mihalko does like his, steps to having difficult conversations.
Yeah,
I don't know if you're familiar. I
yeah,
figure you being Bay Area.
yeah. I've been following him for a number of years. I really
Yeah.
appreciate his work.
Yeah. Have you ever gone to Sex Geek Summer Camp?
Not yet. It's definitely on my list, but
Is it?
yeah, I've seen him. Been to Body Storytelling a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a bit, but I've seen him talk there, and
He has some of my favorite ones, like because I started, I got into wanting to do sex education through finding Betty Dodson.
mm-hmm,
So 2014, I come across an article about her, and I needed to know everything that she had to teach me. Like
yeah,
I say she walked me through my divorce without actually having met her until farther down the line.
uh-huh,
But he tells a story about getting punched. I think it's called like Punched in the Ass by Betty Dodson or something like that. It's such a great Punch in the Asshole or something like that. Such a great story. I've just been connected with Dixie from Body,
oh,
just
cool,
Yoni, mutual person I put
yeah,
you in touch with. Yoni Elkin is good friends with Dixie. And do you know Phoenix Mandel?
yeah,
Phoenix connected me directly with Dixie because Dixie was a Sex Geek summer camp and was looking to maybe
uh,
bring Body down to San Diego.
oh,
So all the worlds, they all intertwine.
yeah, that's
We're
really good.
never too far apart from each other. Um,
I love
yeah.
all the collaborations going on and just like building up on each other's knowledge base and resources and work that we're doing and trying to
So
get
you
good
should have been
information out
on
there.
Should have been on my West Coast intimacy call this morning. Let me tell you what.
Oh yeah.
So for the people at home, I do a West and East Coast intimacy professionals, which is like a peer-to-peer support. And I came in looking for a case consultation, and it was such a really rich conversation. And one of the things we'll say is like, it's so good. We have all these different people in this group that have little bits of knowledge and
Yeah.
all these different places. And the fact that we all come together and like want to share with each other and support each other just feels so much less lonely than I imagine it was years ago in trying to do intimacy work.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so blessed. Anyways. Okay. So I think I do want to bring you back for Soft Cock to talk more in depth about that. And I don't know if it'll happen this year or if it'll happen closer to next year's week. But the other thing that we have in common, or at least we figured out that we have in common, is an appreciation for the book Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. And I talk a lot about reparenting by committee.
Yeah, I like that part. Yeah.
The thing I'm struggling with trying to sort out around this is I do see myself as one of the first safe enough people. Like, talk therapist can be a first safe enough person, right? What do the boundaries around that look like? It's such an interesting space to be in, right? Because if we're creating, like, giving people their first safe, it's a big space we're holding in our clients' lives. Right. And so in cuddling, I've always looked at professional cuddling as being like a massage therapist, and you can keep it going to your massage therapist as long as you want. There doesn't need to be like an end date to your work and an expiration. Like in surrogate partner therapy, we have a cutoff, right?
Yeah.
Once we hit our goals, it's really important that we follow through with kind of a breakup in a way to push the client out of the nest.
Right.
Right. So when I'm not working in my head, surrogate partner therapy has traditionally been around kind of romantic relationships and things like that. I come in with this real fascination with the reparenting side of the work and holding a lot of motherly space. Now I'm going, okay, but does that work need to have an end date so that the client takes that away, like learns to really build those skills to put them to work with another person and not with the professional?
Yeah, no, I think there's an end date, and then there's end moments to kind of play off that, or just like, boundaries within the container where, I may have, a motherly role to you, but I'm not your mom, sort of thing.
Right.
Or like,
Yeah.
Or, it's something that we talk about with some of our clients here where, let's say we see them once a week and we talk about in between session contact, and every therapist has their own beliefs, their own kind of boundaries around that. But I think that's another way where we can have the ending, where the ending is at the end of the 50 minutes, and you can contact me, you can email me if you want, you can text me, and I let them know I may not respond, but I will bring it up in session.
Right.
And I let them talk to me about times when they're, maybe they did wish that I was available on that Monday when they were dealing with whomever. And maybe they do have some anger around that, and I let them express that anger, and I'm not going to take it in. I'm not going to apologize for not being there, but I'm going to meet that emotion and meet that disappointment. I think that's another part of the reparenting process, kind of allowing them to go through the ebbs and flows of emotions. So yeah, I'm totally with you that, like, there needs to be an ending, both in like the final, and it's also in the States, in like Western cultures, we don't really do well. We're not really well versed or well modeled in goodbyes or like healthy endings. And that's why, I talk about that with clients of like, this is a good practice space where we can practice saying goodbye. And so, yeah, I don't know if I'm answering.
Yeah, no, I don't know that there's a question. It's like almost like this needs to be kind of workshopped out in a way of like, where does the benefit, the biggest benefit when does that start to become diminished?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It'll come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The reparenting piece, it's like giving them these new experiences to go through, and then it's helping them with their own attachment styles, with their own shame, to be like in that moment and experience that, and then reflect with you about what's going on.
Again, I think the team component of this is imperative.
Yep, got it.
Like
Yeah,
it really, I think that I don't think that everyone always understands like why do we need to have, I talk to you, Michelle. It's like going to talk therapy. No, it's not.
right.
It's not the same. I am a good listener. I'll
Yeah,
toot my own horn there.
yeah,
But to have somebody holding this whole relationship from a bird's eye view to say, okay, I see some stuff happening here. We need to talk about your feelings.
right.
I think it's just so important. And so,
Yeah, and to get that like recognition and awareness that a lot of us didn't get growing up. Like, hey, I see you're going through something. Let's talk
mhm,
about it. Let's give some space
mhm.
to it. Yeah.
But so to have that, you to process it, I say you as in the clinician, to have that space to
I see what you're saying.
process what comes up in session with me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I can see it, but I'm not going to touch a lot of that. That's outside of my purview, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, when I say like, oh, I see this client like really is doing this kind of I don't want to call it manipulative,
Mm.
but they've got an agenda to
Mm-hmm.
see where they can push the boundaries of your relationship,
Yeah.
right? I certainly can address it, but it's so much more powerful to have them also get to go back to the talk therapist and the talk therapist to say, hey, let's talk about this some more. Where do you think
Yep.
that comes from?
Yep.
Do you see a pattern here? How can we collaborate to kind of heal that in a way? Like
Mm-hmm.
why you're drawn to that dual relationship or
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. So
Yeah, and create that safe space where they can talk about the shameful parts that are coming out around
mhm,
that, or what
mhm,
parts of them were kind of being manipulative, or
yeah,
um, yeah, and bringing it to the surface around that.
yeah,
Yeah, and the triadic model works really well just because of that like consistent contact and wraparound support, and
yeah.
you know the I know the client feels it. The client feels the care of
Have you been able
having.
to work triadically?
Very briefly, it didn't
Mm,
last too long, but
yeah.
yeah,
It doesn't
we've
have
done.
to last long. That's an interesting part.
Mm,
I have had times where I've met with a client one time
hmm.
and been able to go back and report back to their talk therapist of my experience. And there's just so much information that I'm able to glean
Cool.
because of the way I'm able to connect with the client, especially now that we have so much telehealth happening.
Uh-huh.
Like sometimes I'm the first in-person contact and the
Right.
therapist is like, so what is the person actually like in person? Because I've only ever met them over Zoom or
Uh-huh.
what have you. So I get to kind of be a reporter in a sense of like reporting my experience and how they engaged with me. And sometimes that's enough to go, okay, I see where they are. They're not actually ready to move forward with this kind of work.
Uh-huh.
Let's
Yeah,
circle back later. So I don't think there's a longevity says whether something was like successful or not.
got it.
It's like I think so much data can be gleaned even with a single session.
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah.
And I mean that's a really important kind of assessment too, of saying like, well, now's not the right time. There's some other work to be done before we can. Yeah.
Yeah. In my work, a lot of times people show up because they think that it's just a simple sex problem.
Uh-huh. Be nice.
It's
Yeah.
just not my dick.
Right.
So I say this, and I'm going to publicly hope that this presentation gets picked. But I did put in an ASEC abstract
Cool.
that is titled. I did it with I presented it with, or I submitted it with my colleague Brian Gibney,
Mm.
entitled "It's Not About Your Dick: What Clinicians Can Learn from Surrogate Partner Therapy." Right? Like let's
Good.
talk about the foundational stuff that seems to show up that is connected to the sexual dysfunction issues
Yeah.
and get everybody on board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a talk that I give to like local training centers for early career clinicians, and um, probably do it for other therapists too. But it's called queering sex therapy beyond functioning, and how a lot of people come to sex therapy because of functioning, or they think of sex therapy as just a functioning thing, but there's a lot more to it than just getting your dick up. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm really glad that you're, I hope they should choose it.
I hope they do.
Yeah.
We came off a pretty great year last at the 2023 conference. We got to present. I had a case presentation on surrogate partner therapy, and we had I'm the co-chair of their somatic sexuality professional special interest group. So we also had a
Cool.
presentation just about working with touch workers in general. So
Nice.
we have some momentum that hopefully we can ride in with again this year and get some more
Yeah.
spotlighted attention on what we can do in this work. But
How do you talk to therapists about the legalities, or to their concerns or their anxieties
sure.
about the legalities of it?
Well, one,
I just say no one's been
it's
persecuted,
so
but that doesn't
complicated.
really
Yeah,
help it.
nobody's been prosecuted. I say the biggest thing you can run into is more so it being inappropriate for certain clients. Like
Mm,
the only lawsuit I've ever heard of was a therapist that got sued. This was not legality stuff, right? It was more of a liability lawsuit, I think. They tried to do surrogate partner therapy with a married couple,
hmm.
and in the end they divorced, and the injured party blamed the surrogate partner and the therapist, which, yeah, we don't take a monogamous couple and introduce a form of non-monogamy, because even if it didn't get physical as far as erotic contact, the emotional intimacy that happens in that space would be really disruptive to most monogamous couples.
Right. That's a good point.
So most of my work is leaning away from the erotic side of the work. So it's a complicated question for me to answer. In traditional surrogate partner therapy, there's no direct exchange for money for sexual contact.
Got it.
Because it's not a guaranteed part of the work.
Right.
It's really a decision that comes down to all three: the therapist, the surrogate partner, and the client deciding that it's the best route. So it gets away from that direct exchange. So here's $50 and I get a blowjob, or like that. Yeah, and for me, I just feel like I'm moving farther and farther away from it, because it's a long time to hold sexual energy with a client. And I'm finding that to be the hardest part of the work for me. I love engaging with people in a platonic intimacy.
Right.
I love it. I could do that all day. I love the space that I started in, right? This goes back to me being a professional cuddler first.
Yeah.
And the thing is I think there's certain cases that probably do need erotic contact, but I feel like most of them don't. And as somebody who works with primarily cis men, they only come to the work because there's a problem happening in the bedroom. And so they can't fathom that we would do work that didn't include erotic work.
Right.
My dick isn't working right. Clearly we need to touch my dick.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't want to touch your dick.
Oh.
I want to help you queer your sex. We can do that without actually getting into a sexual space, right? Yeah. And I think I'm matching what is alive for me personally and making my work kind of fit what's working. I also figured out I don't experience sexual attraction. I'm on the asexual spectrum. This is a new thing I'm learning about myself. And when I think back to how I've engaged in sex over the years, between that and the fact that I am deeply, deeply in the responsive desire camp, sex is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I can get paid enough to make that work, and especially over a long period of time.
Yeah.
right? It's not about the client. It's really a lot about me meeting my own, like, what do I need to stay mentally healthy? And I just feel a need to pull away from that side of the work more and more.
Yeah, I talked to a surrogate once who we were talking about therapists and surrogates, and he was like, "Yeah, to me, you could see 4, 5, 6 clients a day. I could not." And I was like, "Yeah,
Mm-mm.
absolutely not." Yeah,
Yeah, that is it's a big part of it. Yeah, it's hard. My last client that I finished in surrogate partner therapy was almost 2 years of work,
yeah,
and I would say we were in erotic for the last year of it.
uh huh,
It's a lot,
yeah,
and I adore him. He's a lovely, lovely person. I love spending time with him. But if I had known that kind of energy expenditure, I
right,
don't know that I would have signed up for that.
yeah,
And we did great work together. I'm so so satisfied in some ways, and also just looking at myself and going, how sustainable is this, Michelle?
sure.
Like,
No, it's a
I
real, yeah,
it's real.
yeah,
So the question of legalities is it's not illegal anywhere in the United
right.
States.
But I hear that so much when I bring it
Hmm.
up in my talks. They're like, "But what if am I
What if things go wrong?
yeah am I going to lose my
Well,
license?" Yeah,
yeah. I think we talk a lot about the how licensing works, and that you're going to get a warning of some sort,
yeah,
and always keep like meticulous notes,
mm-hmm.
right? Justify why this was decided to be the best course of action. Get supervision, right?
Oh
Have
yeah,
those kinds of trails that you've not taken this lightly,
yeah,
and and I think it's really, really powerful and really shakes up, the client's progress or the stalled.
oh
If they're stalled out, I think it's a really good thing to shake it up and be a really engaged therapist.
yeah,
Right? Like I've had the therapists that don't want to be super engaged in it. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. No, this isn't separate.
mm-hmm.
This is
Yeah, right. This is the
together.
work.
This isn't
Yeah,
Michelle goes and does her thing
right.
and you guys do your thing and you know that it's what's happening over here because I'm telling you, but you're not actually engaged in it. Like
Uh huh.
I think this is the shift between what used to be called supervising surrogate partner therapy, where
Hmm.
the clinician was seen as a supervisor that kind of gave directions
Oh,
to the
interesting.
surrogate.
Huh.
Yeah. And now I think the surrogate comes in with a lot of their own
Good.
kind of education and background, that it needs to be more level as
Yeah,
far as like not a hierarchy between the professionals.
I agree.
So I think there's just a big evolution happening in
Yeah.
this field. And I'm probably I hesitate to go as far as branding myself the asexual surrogate partner, but um
Catchy. Yeah.
it's right around the corner. I'm telling you,
Uh-huh.
I just keep inching closer and closer to just being like, there's so much power here. If I can get the therapist to understand the opportunity that is held in this collaborative process and see that it's not about the sex,
Mm.
then it becomes less, I think, risky to a lot of therapists. They don't think of it quite as risky because if the sexual component isn't part of the work, maybe they could settle into it a little easier and then start to learn what can be achieved in that collaboration.
Right. Yeah.
I got ideas,
Yeah. Good.
like,
No, you were saying also reminded me of when I talked to uh, one of my friends who does psychedelic assisted therapy, and he says that their biggest concern for getting kind of outed or for getting caught up in the legal issues is rarely ever the client themselves, but it's the partner of the client who's changing,
mhm.
and the partner doesn't want them to change or is
Yeah.
threatened by the change, or
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, that could happen in regular talk therapy
totally,
too,
yeah,
right? But is that a space where it's been normalized that change is going to happen and in that it's not such a
ish.
blame game?
I think there might be, maybe for the psychedelic piece, there's this idea that it's, and it can be transformational, but there's the idea that it's always transformational, and that you're going to go in, my partner's going to go in, have some transformational experience, realize that I shouldn't be abusing them, and then they're going to
Yeah.
leave me, and that's the yeah.
Yeah. So I prefer to work with people that are not partnered. I mean,
Mm,
if I could only work with people not partnered, I might be a yes to that. But also, like, maybe not. I don't know. But I kind of like when people come to me and they're partnered and I'm just going to be working with one of them, which is, I definitely rarely ever do actual couples work.
uh,
Um, I like try to talk them out of working with me.
mm,
Like, it's almost that level of informed consent of like, do you understand
right.
even showing up to do cuddling with me, and I'm gonna, help empower you to have your voice. I'm gonna like help you understand why it's really important to have a no, because I can't trust your yes until I've heard it. I can't get close to
Yeah.
you if I don't know that it's there. And like, especially if you come to me and you're kind of the doormat of the relationship, and then
Right.
you come out of here and you start going, oh wait, I need to be more authentic in my responses. It's not, I'm really butting up against resentment and all these things,
Hmm.
and you've been married for a couple of decades. You're going to want to get a couples counselor
Oh
on
yeah.
board for this real quick, right?
Yeah.
And so I will sit down and I'm like, okay, you've got a penis problem. First question is always, do you think you have to have sex with me? Is that part of this? No? Okay, great. Maybe we can work together, right? And then it's like, okay, but does your partner know you're going to be working with me?
Uh-huh, yeah.
Well, no, she just told me I need to get this okay.
Plausible
Do
deniability.
you
Yeah.
understand that you cannot spend time with me and not leave different?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I don't know anybody that doesn't become a little bit more like me,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like one of these, do you really know what you're consenting to? Why don't you
Right.
just think about this? And a lot of times they never come back. And I'd much rather have that than have the opposite of like the partner showing up at my door going, what did you do to my husband or
Right.
girlfriend or whatever, right? Like, yeah, change is hard for people.
Yeah, it can be really scary. Yeah.
Yeah. Even when your marriage ends, I can go, well, that's ultimately you're going to think this was the best thing,
Uh-huh.
right? Right now, probably doesn't feel so sure, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's the downside of like changing people's lives,
Yeah. Well, I
right?
mean, I think the other thing that's coming to mind is I see this a lot with guys, but this idea that they've been brought into therapy to get fixed, and that there's something wrong with them to adjust or to fix, or
Mm-hmm.
and they understandably when they have that idea that they're very guarded and defended and you know untrusting, which I'm like, yeah, of course, why would you?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, I'm like, no, we're not here to fix you. We're here to help you understand yourself. Where you get to understand yourself. You get to understand all the wild things that are going on in your body and your mind, and how they're connected and not, all that stuff, and try to add some excitement to this learning process rather than like, oh fuck, I got to learn about myself. I got to learn about my emotions. I got to learn how to communicate,
Yeah.
um, and like working with that inner critic that can pop in of like, oh, this is stupid, or I'm not going to be able to do this, or I sound too Californian, or whatever it may be. That's a big part of the work, as you know, is like working with that inner critic and letting them know, trying to find strategies to help them quiet the inner critic. Or something I said earlier today was, uh, tell your inner critic to wait outside while you're practicing this new thing. Like, easier said than done,
Yeah.
but just practice saying, you wait outside
Yeah.
while I do this. You're not
Yeah. And
welcome in
and when
here.
they show up, just exit them again.
Yep.
It's kind of like I say, it's like meditation.
Yeah.
When your mind wanders, just come back.
Yep.
It's okay. Just remind them that they can go and come back.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, it's easier said than done. But
Right. And I
yeah.
repeat that over and over again. It's easier said than done, but worth trying. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's just practice.
Yep.
Just practice. I think the scarier thing in the growth trajectory is when you know things have to change at home or
Yeah.
wherever, and processing that and all of, broken promises and oh, all of that.
Yeah, and boundaries with yourself,
Hmm.
around um, communication, or boundaries with showing up or not showing up, or um, resilience. Is often thought of as just like taking whatever is thrown at you, when in reality it's like knowing your capacity, knowing your boundaries, knowing how to communicate them.
Yeah, being able, like, that's something that I practice in space with clients, is like having them start to be able to identify when they feel full,
Yep.
right? Like capacity is so different for everyone. So then they're like, well, how long should our sessions be? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what your capacity is,
Yeah.
right? We've got to be able to start to practice honoring it. Like it's a question that I've said, repeated a few times. Somebody asked us on, me and Brian Gibney, my work husband, who I make all my professional babies with. Somebody asked us, like, how do people figure out what they want in life, right? And it's like, well, you got to figure out the little stuff first,
Uh-huh.
right? So
Yeah.
if you can't name that you need to use the bathroom and then go take yourself to the bathroom and not put it off, how are you going to do the other things? So in that, like, learning what your capacity is and building your capacity, part of that building the capacity is teaching your body that it can trust you to stop when you are full.
Yep.
That's part of the work. And sometimes, because I get a lot of really growth oriented people sometimes, where they're like, but I have this thing, I need to get to the thing, I should be able to do this, why
Right.
can't I? Especially in touch, right? I'm here to overcome my
Yeah.
aversion to touch. And I'm like, well, we're not going to overcome it by you ignoring that
Right.
aversion to touch.
Just barreling
There's
through.
alarms going off in your system, right? There's a reason why you have an aversion to touch. And until we rebuild your personal, like, safety, your inner child knowing that you're going to take care of you,
Yeah.
there's if you're blowing through it, we're not going to make any progress. We're just going to stay still.
Yeah.
So,
Or
yeah.
make it worse
Hmm.
by pushing through. Yeah.
Yeah. So it goes back to the reparenting by committee,
Mm.
is like, I think of my spot as like the laboratory to experiment, where you're not experimenting with another person, like in the
Uh-huh.
sense of like a friend or somebody who doesn't either know they're being experimented with,
Mm.
or um, they have their own stuff, right? So you have a chemical reaction that can happen because one person's trigger is, just bouncing back and forth, right? And so to
Right.
get a little space to get to do a baseline reset
Uh-huh.
of what can it feel like to be with someone who's not also responding with their triggers, and
Yeah.
can really encourage you to do the scary things like saying no and advocating for yourself, and that it doesn't have to be a scary event like maybe it was in your childhood or whatnot.
Yeah, we just did a men's retreat 2 weekends ago, where uh talked a little bit about reparenting by committee and about trust. And I had them go through and write down people they trust, what they trust them for, and why.
Hmm.
And like really breaking it down. And then so they know, but then also it can help them think about the other areas of their life that they can trust. And it ranged from like, I go to this friend for financial advice because they seem to be doing well, or you know and so what it seemed like it came up with was, either they have good experience in it, or when I'm talking to them about this, they're not shaming me, they're not being shitty
Hmm.
about it. And then this
Hmm.
happened in the retreat, where guys started to open up about some things that they had a little bit of shame around, and they've been holding since they were young. um, and then we were like, oh yeah, that's understandable. And just that like lived experience of
Like,
not being pointed and humiliated or
yeah,
whatever is super fucking healing, man. It's like, yeah, it goes a long way.
it's the reprocessing,
Yeah.
right? And that's all these different, there's so many different ways to get the opportunity to reprocess,
Right.
whether it's that journal exercise of writing the same story 4 times. I know that's exactly what's happening, is they're just doing memory reconsolidation, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
I get that. Like, I took a class on memory reconsolidation, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is totally what happens in this space, in this space, in this space.
Mm,
Like, yes, that's what's going on in EMDR. Yes, that's what's going on in IFS. Yes, that's what's going on in cuddle space, even. Like,
right.
have I think that the simple formula for it was something like a regulated nervous system, and you add just a little bit of activation,
Mm.
and then your knowing, or what did they call it, the mismatch system comes on and says, wait a minute, this isn't how my
Uh-huh.
subcortical brain thinks this is supposed to go. But you're in this special little spot where you've got enough regulation that you can actually make that connection of like, oh wait,
Yeah.
that's my 3-year-old's idea of how the world works,
Right.
not my, as it would say, like wise adults and like the relational life therapy world. I've
Yeah.
touched on so many different little like niches in the talk therapy space. It's just fun to look at it now from that kind of angle of like, oh, we're just doing lots of different ways to do memory reconsolidation,
Hmm. Yeah.
finding
I
what
mean,
works.
yeah. It's a good process, right? Just for the very reason, we have one practitioner here at Rouse who does brain spotting.
I love brain
Yeah.
spotting. Oh my goodness. And
And
I
I,
and I
uh,
I would love to I should sit down with somebody who does brain spotting and EMDR to say, help me understand the difference,
yeah.
because I've walked out of brain spotting, which I have never had EMDR. I've been in the space where it was being done as like a demo.
Mm.
The space where it was being done as a demo felt so activating. Like I was just watching it, and like all of us in the
Mm.
room are like in tears, like we're in it with this person. It
Hmm.
felt really activating. Where the brain spotting, every time I've left a brain spotting session, I have felt on top of the world.
Mm.
And I don't know if that's just my experience. But I've just been like, I could have a shot of that
Yeah.
on the regular.
I had, yeah, I've done brain spotting 3 times with my therapist around a like particular trauma that I went through 2 years ago. um, and yeah, I was like floored because the first time I did it, it was like in the middle of my work day, and just to say that, like I was kind of in my work
Mm-hmm.
mind, kind of just gotta get through my list. Um, and I was able to really just like sink into the emotion, sink into the moment. Within a few 10 minutes, I was in tears in a very relieving sort of way, not in
Mm-hmm.
a bad way. And by the end of it, yeah, I wasn't on top of the world, but I definitely felt more resourced, and I felt like I had more access to the parts of myself that could advocate for myself, or that that felt more in control and less like helpless. And
Maybe clarity,
yeah.
like a sense of clarity. For me, a sense of clarity gives me a sense of control and power. And
Mm.
yeah,
Hmm.
I had the wildest. My father passed away a couple years ago in
Mm.
September,
Sorry.
and it was one of those things where it was not the worst thing that's happened to me, for
I
sure.
see.
It was a relief in
Yeah.
many ways. In fact, I describe it as feeling like a cloak of labels fell off of me. Like I walked
Mm.
out of like I dropped the cloak and just walked forward and was
Yeah.
like relieved of a lot of things I thought about myself that were really based on like him
Uh-huh.
in a lot of ways. So fast forward, I was in love with aqua aerobics, and I was taking this really great water class, and it's in the deep water, and I get there early. I always have my corner, and I have a friend that's in the other corner, and we're shooting the shit back and forth across the pool waiting for class to start. And I'd heard stories of this man that would show up at class but not be in the class, but would refuse to get out of the pool, and then he would like harass the instructor and like cuss her out while he'd like pace behind her around the pool. Like
Wow.
I heard this happen a couple of times, and it was never there when it happened. So of course I'm sitting there, I'm swimming there, I'm whatever, I'm
Yeah.
floating. And this guy swims down the lane of my friend's lane and like runs into her. And I looked at her across the pool. I go, what the hell is that? And she goes, that's that dude. And I was like, oh no, he didn't. Right. And I swim over, I get like 10 feet ahead of her. And then one of our other mutual friends get in front of me about 10 feet. And the guy gets in the pool, and they're like, oh, he's not going to come back down. I go, no, I think he is. This guy seems like, from his story, he's pretty entitled. Right. So he
Hmm.
comes swimming back down. He runs into the lady in front of me and gets all in her shit. And I just start screaming at him that he needs to get out of the pool. And like, I'm like, fuck you. Like, I'm just like, because people that work there can't do this.
Right.
Right. And I am just like, I'm in a pool full of older women.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm like, I am going to like empower them all to like take a stand. I'm going to tell
Yeah.
this guy off like he's every man in their life, right? And the manager met him at the stairs to escort him out afterwards. But I was just like, I was chanting, get out, like all this stuff. Like, just I was probably I kind of was like a lunatic in a way,
Yeah.
but that's not how I said it.
Yeah.
So fast forward. I'm in a meeting with some colleagues, and there's a therapist in the space that does brain spotting, and something came up, and I don't remember what it was, but I felt like the rush of feelings come up, and I went, "Oh my goodness, I've got things I need to deal with
Mm,
this." And I'd already skipped a class because I got this fear hit me like the next week, where I went, "Oh God, this guy's going to show up. He's an injured white male.
uh-huh.
He's going to come shoot the," you know what I mean? Like, did
Sure.
the whole
Sure.
thing. So I said to the therapist, I said, "Is there any chance I could get a one-off with you? I've
Mm,
just got this specific thing I need to work through." And she was like, "Yeah." We did probably 45 minutes, right? Whatever the usual
yeah.
therapy hour is, right? And I went into it knowing, like, I'd already processed it a bit of like, my father was the first man I was afraid of.
Mm,
This dude is just an extension
yeah.
of that, where I got to let out all the feelings I had about my father. I came into it kind of knowing all of that.
Uh-huh.
But in the end, I took off the rest of the day. I assumed I would be dead to the world the rest of the day, clear the schedule, make this the last thing I
I
have to do.
see.
And it wasn't like that.
Huh,
By the time I got done, I felt so like it was like a clearing
good.
of just a lot of negativity that just needed to go away.
Good.
So good. I'm a
Yeah.
big fan. Long story. I'm a really big fan of brain
Yeah.
spotting.
No, it's great. No, yeah, I mean that was a big reason why after my personal experience, we already had a provider here who was interested in it. But after my personal experience, I'm like, we need to bring this in here. And so I like immediately
Mm-hmm.
set up for the training to happen so that they could be, trained. And Marjorie is wonderful at it. And she's already incredibly trained at working with trauma and survivors of intimate partner violence. And so it just seemed like a really perfect fit, you know?
Yeah, what a great addition. I hope to one day be involved in a practice here in San Diego where it's such a lovely wraparound of options,
Yeah.
where I am just one of the options as part of a bigger team,
Yep.
right? Like, that's put it out in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Yeah. Awesome. Um any part of that, keep going back to the complex PTSD, any part of that book that was really like your favorite part of it that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I mean, the reparenting one definitely stands out to me. The inner critic, what I call the inner critic and outer critic as like
Yep.
toxic siblings. And it's been something that I've been talking about with clients around just judginess. And,
Hmm.
but I'm going to start using the critic language more because I think judginess doesn't sit well with some.
Hmm.
But
We have a negative connotation to it for
yeah,
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, I really like what I would say is essentially, when you're judging others, you're also judging yourself. Or when you're
Hmm.
judging yourself, then you'll probably notice that your judgment or criticism of others are probably going to be very high and of the same ilk.
Hmm.
um, and that these two, the inner critic and outer critic, are toxic siblings. And to just catch yourself in those moments to really understand where they're coming from, um, and why you're doing it. And for the why, I take some of the therapy language out of it by saying, you end up kind of playing a different game in life when you're just constantly criticizing yourself and others. There's more of like a transactional game that you're playing, more of a competitive, but not in a fun way, where like no one ever wins, no one ever is succeeding except, you know, the ones that you're idealizing. Like, what other games can we introduce into your life? What's another way of succeeding in life rather than getting to the top? So it doesn't really address the critic directly. It's more of like a
Hmm.
sideways way of getting to the critic,
Yeah.
and hopefully increasing their own like agency or self advocacy. Like, oh wait, no, I want to play a different game. I don't want to play.
Yeah, the critic came into play, if I recall, in the area where they're talking about verbal ventilation. At least that's the spot I'm remembering
Mm-hmm.
the loudest, because I think it was like, oh, permission to verbally ventilate
Yeah.
inside the boundaries of not allowing the critic to show up,
Right.
right? That you
Right.
have to just talk about like how you feel, but not like
Not judge it.
self-deprecation,
Yeah.
that without the self-judgment. Yeah, I
Yeah.
really like that. That was, and the other part I really loved is all the permission he gave for tears.
Yeah.
Wow, like that was one of those things I've had to go through, that process myself of learning to love my tears. Like
Mm.
it was a process to let them even show up to begin
Mm-hmm.
with. And then it was, gosh, why can't you just show up when it's convenient? Right? This is not the time to have these tears
Uh-huh.
show up, right? To getting to the point of like, oh no, this is good to have these tears, and this is just moving this stuff along,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I really loved that area of the book of just giving all the, like, the, not even just permission, but the importance of the grief
Yeah.
and the tears and washing that away. And yeah.
Yeah. And then just how we broke down just the, not the stages of grief, but just the necessary parts of grief. Like you're saying, crying and angering. It's a really helpful framework to talk about that, the ventilating,
Mm-hmm.
so that people will be, especially because in the States, in Western society, like grieving is very much looked down upon. We're supposed to just kind of carry on, and move
You get
on.
3 days, as it
Right.
was mentioned on a episode I just recorded the other day with a colleague that likes to
Uh,
work in grief.
yeah.
And we're just talking about how we just don't have a good framework for, like, we don't know how we're supposed to grieve, right? And
Yeah.
we're not given much of an opportunity to really get into it. We're supposed to like bypass it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I appreciated the way that he really normalized and like just broke it down. Of like, nope, it's okay. And I mean, that's a big part of the work that I do, is helping them understand when grief is showing up, and that it's not just about death, that it's about lots of losses.
We run
Um,
into it in my work when people realize what they haven't experienced, right? They get to a certain age in life and maybe they finally seek some support.
yeah.
And then there's this grieving of lost time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what could have been different, or, something like that.
There's lots of options,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
And I did,
Oh, we've,
yeah. And I mean, I feel like it's a very accessible book. And so I recommend the book to clients, um,
yeah.
and I say, come back and we'll talk about it and see what came up for you, and we'll learn
I've recommended it to some of my colleagues as required reading if you're
together.
working in relational work.
Yeah.
I just think I think that people think of complex PTSD as being something that is, I must have been in some kind of extreme situation,
Right.
right? And I think that helping people understand that even just only a certain kind of nurturing, like your bare minimum, taking, yes, you're alive kind of thing, but maybe you weren't emotionally nurtured, or
Yeah.
like those can all show up under that same kind of umbrella. And
Totally.
I love in the beginning of the book, I think he said something like, if you went to the DSM-5 and you took all the things that fall in,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Sounds right.
But
Yeah.
yeah. Well, David, we've hit an hour.
Oh, cool. That was fast.
I always say I'm not going to turn this into the Joe Rogan show where I end up
Just
with
3 hour.
like 3 hour
Yeah.
interviews, although it'd be really easy for me to do
Yeah.
that with some people. Is there anything that we touched? I know you've had some ideas that you lost. Did any of them come back?
They didn't come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if they
Do
come
the
back,
self talk
shoot me
week.
a
Yeah.
message and let me
Okay.
know what they are, because I'm curious.
Yeah.
But uh, I wish you were in San Diego.
Me
Like
too.
it would be great to have you in my community. I run like happy hours and stuff. It's always great to have more great people in my community, but it's okay. You're in the Bay. You're close enough.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be a time that I'll be
We'll
coming
run
down to San
across each
Diego
other.
in the next, I mean, probably next year. I'll come down to San Diego once. I'll let you know for sure. I'd
Yeah,
love to
let
meet
me
up.
know for
Yeah.
sure. That'd be great to connect.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on. I'm gonna definitely have you on for Soft Cock Week.
Yeah.
If we're reading the same book, we can come on and and chat about that.
Sounds good. Yeah.
I'm currently in The Big Leap.
Oh, cool.
Have you read that one?
No.
It's just like about like getting rid of limiting, like what limits you unconsciously from like really being in your genius. And
Cool.
so that's kind of got me in my head
Yeah. I'm
thinking.
taking, after the men's retreat, I'm just listening to like comedy podcasts or crime podcasts, or I'm just taking a break because the months leading up to it, I was just, but this Friday we have Midori coming on, coming to our office to do like a consult with other therapists. And so
I
I'm kind of
saw
preparing for that. Yeah, I'm really
that.
excited about that. But then
That's
after that, I will
great.
go back to my bad TV and comedy podcast just for a break, just for,
Thank you. I do that too. People, what do you watch? Just some shit TV
Yeah.
to consciously dissociate for a little while. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Auto regulate, I think, is what I was listening to. I
Oh,
was doing a little like crunching for a client, and I was re-listening to Polysecure Chapter 9 on self or secure attachment with self. It's one of my favorite
uh-huh.
chapters. And I was starting to go, oh yeah, I auto-regulate a lot.
Yeah.
For sure.
But yeah,
I
I'd
do
love to come
Golden
on.
Girls as my comedy side. Just throw what I like to do to reset is also comedy, but I tend to go Golden Girls as my
Oh, that's a great one.
my
Yeah.
go-to. So feel free if you need it in a quick 15-minute fix, like it totally changes my mood. Dorothy's Most Savage Moments on YouTube
I'm writing that
will
down.
solve a lot of things. It is my secret weapon.
That show
So
was my go-to in middle school and high school.
yeah, I used to watch it all the time when it was a regular coming out every week Saturday night show or whatever it was. I did not get the nuances
Right.
of how powerful that show was
Yeah.
then, but
Yeah.
watching it now is like it's pretty great still.
Yeah.
All right,
Well,
David.
thank you for having
Where
me.
can
Yeah.
people find you online?
Yep, we are at Rouse Relational Wellness. It's rousetherapy.com, or any of the social media channels at Rouse Therapy, ROUSE. And we offer a variety of different therapy services, all focused on couples and sex therapy, including workshops and retreats and group therapy. And we service people in San Francisco and all over California. So yeah, come check us out. We also just have a ton of free information in our blog section for you to look through and learn.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
I love a good resource.
Cool.
So thanks, David.
Thank you,
It
Michelle.
was so good to get to a little extra time with you. And let's stay in touch.
Please. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to comment, pose a question, or learn more about the guests often featured on the show, visit us at intimacylabpodcast.com. Please also take a moment to review us on your favorite podcast app. It's one of the best ways to show your support. As for me, you can find out more about my work at meetmichellerenee.com, as well as on most social medias at meetmichellerenee. Let's connect again soon.